Hey guys, tonight we slip back in time into a place that smells faintly of wood smoke, damp straw, and the not-so-faint aroma of animals living a little too close for comfort. You blink awake in a darkened timber house, the ceiling rafters low, the air heavy with the mingling scents of ash and hay. Outside, roosters already crow like alarm clocks you didn't ask for, and the faint hum of a medieval village rising with the dawn seeps through the cracks of the shutters. You probably won't survive this between famine, disease, and your neighbors who believe garlic solves everything, but hey, you've made it to sunrise. That's worth a celebration. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is there. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The sun has barely crested the horizon, painting the thatched roofs in a pale wash of gold when your day truly begins. You hear the scrape of wooden stools being dragged across the earthen floor, the shuffle of bare feet, and the soft murmur of prayers muttered in half-sleep. It isn't just you. The whole village wakes in rhythm with the dawn, because wasting daylight here is practically a crime. Lamps are expensive, candles rarer still, and so every shaft of natural light must be squeezed dry before night pulls its blanket back over the land. You trudge outside, rubbing your eyes, and immediately regret stepping barefoot into the dew-soaked grass. It's shockingly cold, and the scent of wet earth clings to your toes. Above, smoke begins to coil lazily from dozens of chimneys, gray streaks smudging the clear sky like a child's chalk drawing. Dogs bark, children squeal, hens scatter. And already a man is leading two heavy oxen out from a byre, their sides steaming in the cool morning. The main road through the village is nothing more than packed dirt, lined with huts made from wattle and daub. You glance down it and see figures stirring, bending, lifting, trudging. A medieval morning is nothing if not busy. There is no such thing as me time. Your survival is bound to the rhythm of collective work. And yes, if you're hoping for a latte, forget it. Your options are water, weak ale, or water that wishes it was ale. Ale is safer than water most days, since wells can be contaminated, and even children sip it like juice boxes with a kick. Historians still argue whether medieval people really drank ale constantly, or if that's an exaggeration, though, considering your options, you'll take the mug. Breakfast, if you're lucky, is already bubbling in a blackened pot over the hearth. More often than not, it's pottage, a mushy stew of grains, peas, maybe a scrap of bacon if you're blessed, but mostly yesterday's leftovers reheated until edible. You dip in a wooden spoon, taste the earthy broth, and chew slowly. It's bland, but it keeps you alive. Some mornings you get coarse rye bread, dense, chewy, and likely baked with a little grit from the millstone. Congratulations, you now have medieval dental insurance in the form of broken teeth. While you eat, you watch the rest of the household stir. Children scamper about, fetching water from the bucket at the door. Women fold blankets, sweep rushes from the floor, and toss scraps to the pigs outside. Men check tool size, spades, plow irons sharpening blades with the rhythmic scrape of stone on metal. There's no snooze button in this world, only endless chores tugging at your sleeves. A quick, quirky tidbit for you. Some medieval people believed that morning dew, if gathered carefully, could be used as a cosmetic to keep your skin fresh and youthful. You imagine crouching outside with a cloth, dabbing at grass blades like some medieval influencer prepping for a skincare routine. Spoiler, it doesn't work, but you'd look committed. As the day brightens, the noise of the village grows louder. A shepherd whistles sharply, driving his flock toward pasture. A cart creaks past, pulled by a pony that looks like it gave up on life 3 winters ago. Neighbors call greetings or sometimes insults because, let's be honest, small villages hold grudges like dragon hordes. You overhear a woman muttering about her neighbor's geese wandering into her cabbages again. You smile faintly, realizing rural drama is timeless. Swap the cabbages for Wi-Fi passwords, and it's basically modern suburbia. You pass the church, its bell tower, a stubby wooden frame rather than the grand stone spires you might picture. Still, it rules the village's rhythm. The priest, already awake, swings the bell rope with slow pulls, calling the faithful to early prayers. The sound rolls across the fields, a reminder that even before the plowshare, your first duty is often to heaven. By now, your stomach is warm with broth, and your limbs begin to shake off sleep. You shoulder a wooden rake, perhaps a hoe, and follow the stream of villagers heading outward toward the fields. The dirt path is slick from dew. Your shoes, if you have them, are little more than leather-stitched thin, and mud seeps through anyway. Ahead, the land opens into long strips of farmland, each belonging to a household but farmed collectively, like lines on a giant communal quilt. And here's a mainstream fact to chew on. The open field system dominated much of medieval Europe. Instead of private fenced farms, villagers worked long, narrow strips of land scattered across different fields, ensuring everyone got a mix of good and bad soil. It kept things fair, though it meant walking half a mile just to reach your assigned plot. In other words, your Fitbit would be very pleased. The oxen groan as they're yoked to the plow, their broad shoulders pressing into the wooden beam. A farmer clucks his tongue, guiding them forward, the iron tip biting into soil still heavy with night moisture. You watch furrows split the earth in straight lines, clods flipping over to expose rich black loam. The smell of fresh turned soil rises sharp in your nose, earthy and raw, reminding you of every garden bed you've ever dug. This one feeds dozens, not just your salad cravings. And here's your first sarcastic wake-up call of the night. If you thought pulling weeds in your backyard was bad, imagine doing it with tools that break every other week, while the lord of the manor expects his share no matter how your harvest turns out. Good luck explaining crop failure when your taxes are due in grain, not excuses. Yet, despite the grind, there's beauty in the scene. Mist hovers low over the fields, catching sunlight like gauze. Birds swoop and chirp, picking worms from the freshly torn soil. Somewhere, a boy whistles a tune while chasing crows away with a stick. Life is hard, yes, but it thrums with rhythm, predictable, demanding, and strangely comforting. By mid-morning, sweat slicks your back, the chill long gone. The oxen snort clouds of steam, tails flicking flies. Your arms ache from guiding the plow, your shoulders from carrying water. Breaks are rare, but when you pause, you sit on a stone and chew on a hunk of bread, washing it down with that trusty ale. A neighbor joins you, complaining about his rheumatism, though he's probably only 40. You nod sympathetically, knowing medieval aging is basically dog years. Historians still argue whether the daily labor of peasants left them healthier than modern desk workers. On one hand, the constant physical activity kept bodies fit. On the other, malnutrition and disease cut lives painfully short. You glance at your roughened hands and think, sure, you're toned, but at what cost? As the sun climbs higher, the soundscape changes again. Bells ring faintly from distant villages. Carts rattle on the horizon, crows caw in defiance of your stick-waving friends. Life unfolds in layers, mundane, repetitive, but stitched with small dramas, jokes, and traditions that keep people tethered to their world. And with that, your first morning in the medieval village settles into its rhythm, smoke over rooftops, furrows splitting the earth, and you, half-weary already, realizing that dawn here isn't gentle. It's a summons, a call to survival, and you've answered it by simply stepping out into the light. Breakfast is barely cleared when the next round of duties tumbles upon you like an avalanche. There's no lounging in bed scrolling through your phone here unless your phone is a wooden bucket and your notifications are the geese honking furiously because you forgot to feed them. The hearth is still smoldering, sending out curls of smoke that cling to your clothes. You poke at the pot, scraping the last sticky remnants of pottage, and scoop it into a wooden bowl for a child who's already tugging on your sleeve. The taste is familiar, grainy, earthy, A little charred at the edges, but it fills the stomach enough to face what's coming. Morning chores tumble in a cycle that feels endless but necessary. Someone has to fetch water from the well at the village green, and congratulations, today it's you. You heave a bucket down into the darkness, hear the splash echo, then wrestle it back up, muscles straining. Water dribbles over your hands, icy against your skin. Carry it carefully, trying not to spill, though half of it sloshes out anyway. Back home, the bucket is set by the hearth for cooking, washing, and maybe even drinking, if the ale supply has run thin. Meanwhile, others are scattering grain for the hens, who peck and squabble noisily. A pig grunts impatiently, shoving its snout through the pen's wooden slats, demanding scraps. You throw in peelings from yesterday's turnips, which vanish in seconds. A cow lows mournfully from the byre, and someone rushes to milk her before she grows too restless. The frothy liquid streams into a pail, warm and foamy, and soon children are dipping mugs into it, gulping it down with creamy mustaches. Chores blur together in a haze of motion. You sweep rushes from the floor, toss out spoiled food to the dogs, and shake bedding that smells suspiciously like both sweat and smoke. You hear the clink of metal as your neighbor sharpens a sickle, preparing for the day's work in the fields. Another neighbor patches a hole in his roof, muttering curses as his ladder wobbles dangerously. Everyone's busy, because idleness in a medieval village is practically a crime, not just against yourself, but against the whole community that relies on you. Here's a mainstream fact, tucked neatly into the scene. Medieval villages ran on what historians call the economy of obligation. It wasn't just about your own household. Your time, your tools, even your animals were bound up in the needs of others. If the harvest failed, you didn't just starve alone, you starved together. Survival depended on cooperation, even when you didn't like the people you were cooperating with. You sit briefly to eat a chunk of rye bread with a smear of soft cheese, chewing slowly as crumbs tumble into your lap. It's simple food, but you're grateful. You imagine, just for a moment, a croissant instead, golden and flaky. Then you laugh out loud, because butter and sugar are luxuries you'll only see if a merchant wagon rattles by, and even then, you won't afford them. And now for a quirky tidbit. In some regions, people believed that bread loaves could be charmed against theft. Bakers would scratch crosses into the crust, not just for piety, but to scare off thieves or worse, witches who might sneak bread from the cooling rack. You look at your loaf and wonder if you should draw a doodle on it too. Maybe a smiley face to keep things modern. After a quick bite, you're handed a broom made of bundled twigs. The floor must be swept again because straw bedding and tracked mud make the house look like a barnyard if left unattended. You sweep in steady strokes, listening to the scrape and shuffle. Then toss the dirt out the doorway, where chickens immediately scratch at it like tiny feathered janitors. The rhythm of the village hums around you. Someone calls out for help repairing a cartwheel. Another voice rings with laughter as children chase each other, their bare feet slapping the packed dirt. A woman kneads dough at her table, arms strong, sweat beading at her temples. The smell of yeast and wood smoke mingles, floating on the morning breeze. Historians still argue whether medieval villagers worked constantly from dawn till dusk, or whether their days were punctuated with more breaks than we imagine. Some records suggest a grueling pace. Others hint at surprising pauses, moments to gossip, rest, or even nap in the sun. You suspect the truth is somewhere in the messy middle, where labor and leisure wove together like threads in a rough woolen cloth. You glance outside and see fields stretching toward the horizon. Today's tasks include tending to those plots, checking for weeds, clearing stones, maybe even guiding the plow if the oxen are in the mood to cooperate. But before you trudge off, there's laundry to tackle. Yes, even in the Middle Ages, socks somehow multiply when you're not looking. Washing clothes means lugging more water, heating it over the hearth, and scrubbing garments with harsh lye soap that smells as aggressive as it feels. You pound the cloth against a wooden board, watching suds bubble. Your knuckles sting from the work, your back bends low, and you can't help thinking wistfully of washing machines. Imagine explaining spin cycle to a medieval villager, though. To be fair, they might think it sounded like a new type of dance. Once clean, the damp clothes are hung across ropes strung in the yard. They flap gently in the breeze, white linen shirts glowing faintly in the sunlight. A dog trots over, sniffs them, and you shoo him away before he decides laundry makes a good chew toy. By now, mid-morning has passed. The sun warms the air, pulling scents from every corner. Manure steaming in the fields. Bread baking in ovens, herbs drying on racks outside. You pause, inhale deeply, and realize how thickly woven smell is into memory. This village will always carry its perfume of earth, smoke, and sweat. Nearby, children carry baskets of eggs, carefully avoiding cracks. A man stirs a vat of ale, the yeasty froth bubbling at the surface. Someone sharpens an axe, preparing to fell more wood for winter storage. The village buzzes like a hive, each person a bee in constant motion. And yet, humor still finds its way into the grind. You overhear a man joke that his oxen are lazier than his in-laws, which earns him a smack from his wife. Another laughs about losing his boot in the mud, claiming it was swallowed whole by the devil. You chuckle softly, realizing that jokes about work, family, and bad luck are as old as humanity itself. By midday, the chores of home give way to chores of the field. You grab your hoe, sling a water skin over your shoulder, and follow the slow stream of neighbors heading outward. But you pause, glancing back at the hearth, the smoky center of everything, the silent witness to your morning. Around it, the village finds its heartbeat. Meals, warmth, stories, scoldings, laughter all born in the glow of embers. You step away, stomach filled, arms aching, mind already calculating the tasks ahead. Bread, broth, and chores. Nothing glamorous, but everything essential. In this world, survival is built from these ordinary stones. Miss a day, and the wall collapses. Keep steady, and the wall stands strong. You shoulder your hoe and step out into the brightness of the day. The sun has already climbed high enough to cast sharp shadows along the village lanes, but it's still early enough that the air carries a crispness. You hear the creak of leather harnesses and the low guttural rumble of oxen being led toward the fields. Today, it's not just about tending small chores around the hearth today. You take your place with the plow. The path to the fields winds past cottages, barns, and patches of garden where women bend low to pluck herbs or chase birds away from tender shoots. Dogs dart in and out of alleys, sniffing, barking, and occasionally stealing whatever scraps they can. Children, some barely old enough to walk steadily, tag along behind their parents, carrying small baskets or sticks, eager to imitate the work they see every day. You, too, fall into step with the flow of bodies moving outward, a slow exodus toward the open land that both feeds and defines the village. The fields unfold before you like a quilt stitched from green and brown. Strips of farmland stretch long and narrow, each belonging to a different family, but scattered across the whole, so no one can claim the best soil all for themselves. This, you recall, is the open field system, clever in its fairness, maddening in its inefficiency. It means that your little plot might be half a mile from your neighbors, and you'll spend as much time walking as you do digging. Still, everyone accepts it, because that's how things have been done for as long as anyone remembers. You approach the oxen, two broad-backed, lumbering beasts with eyes that radiate both patience and silent judgment. Their hides glisten with a sheen of sweat, even though the day is just beginning. The wooden yoke rests heavy across their shoulders, tied with leather straps that creak as they shift. You reach out, pat one flank, and the animal snorts, hot breath puffing in your face. Congratulations, you smell like ox now. A farmer adjusts the plow, its iron tip dull with use, and nods for you to take the reins. This is no light task. The soil resists, heavy and stubborn, clinging like glue to the blade. You dig your heels into the earth, push forward, and feel the jolt as the plow bites into the ground. Furrows split open, clods tumbling aside, the scent of fresh earth rising sharp and damp. It's strangely satisfying, like unzipping the skin of the earth and seeing what lies beneath. But don't get too romantic. Your arms ache after 5 minutes, your shoulders burn, and the oxen seem to have a personal vendetta against walking straight. One veers left to sniff at grass, the other slows to a crawl, forcing you to shout and tug like an underpaid gym trainer. You swear under your breath and then remind yourself, PG-13 narration, keep it light. Let's just say the oxen are testing your patience. A boy trots along the furrows, waving a stick at crows bold enough to swoop down and snatch worms from the newly turned soil. He whoops, arms flailing, and you wonder whether the crows are laughing at him. Somewhere nearby, a woman sings under her breath as she weeds, her voice carrying softly in the breeze. The melody is simple, repetitive, but comforting, an audible reminder that work is stitched with rhythm, almost like a lullaby. Mainstream fact for you: medieval plowing was not a solo gig. It often required a whole team of people to guide the oxen, one to steer the plow, others to follow behind breaking clods, sowing seed, or driving away pests. Farming was labor shared across households, which also meant shared gossip. While your hands blister, your ears are treated to the latest rumor: who's secretly courting who. Whose cow got loose in the barley? Who skipped mass last week and might face a fine? Honestly, the furrows may be straight, but the stories zigzag like wild vines. A quirky tidbit enters the furrow with you. In some places, farmers believe that scattering bits of bread or herbs into the first plowed row would bless the field for the season. It's part superstition, part insurance policy against the unknown. You picture yourself sprinkling crumbs like some kind of medieval fairy godparent of agriculture. Maybe throw in a piece of bacon, just to be safe. The hours drag, the sun climbing higher, your body groaning with every shove. You pause occasionally to sip from your leather water skin. The water tastes faintly of animal hide because, well, it's been stewing in leather all morning, but you drink it anyway, grateful for moisture. You wipe sweat from your brow with a sleeve already stiff from dirt. Your fingernails are black, your back protests with every bend, and you realize farming is the ultimate full-body workout. Except no one here is posting their progress on Instagram. Historians still argue whether medieval diets actually gave peasants enough energy for this relentless work. On one hand, the calories from bread, beans, and ale added up respectably. On the other, protein was scarce, and deficiencies lurked in the shadows. You suspect the truth is both. Enough fuel to push the plow today, but not enough to survive a harsh winter without feeling every rib in your body. Around you, the fields hum with life. Bees buzz at wildflowers edging the furrows. A lark flutters upward, singing loudly against the vast sky. Farmers shout instructions to one another, voices blending with the creak of wood, the grunt of oxen, the metallic rasp of tools. Even the ground seems alive, worms wriggling in the upturned soil, beetles scurrying for cover. You are part of this great pulse, now sweating, straining, contributing to the endless dance between seed and harvest. Midday approaches, and with it comes a pause. The oxen are unyoked, their massive bodies sinking gratefully onto the grass as they chew cud with slow indifference. You sit nearby, tearing at a hunk of bread that tastes drier than ever. Someone passes you a wedge of hard cheese. You nod thanks, biting into it with a crack that makes you silently pray your teeth hold. You laugh to yourself, imagine explaining dental floss to your companions. They'd probably ask if it was edible. Conversation drifts lazily with the breeze. One man complains his boots have worn through again, holes wide enough to let in every pebble. Another jokes about marrying his daughter off to a miller, because at least then he'd never worry about bread. A woman recalls a dream she had of black birds circling her house, and everyone murmurs, half serious, about whether it's an omen. You realize work and superstition walk hand in hand here, each furrow plowed not just with muscle, but with belief. When the break ends, you heave yourself back up, legs stiff, back aching. The oxen grunt as they're yoked again, eyes rolling slightly as though they'd prefer an eternal nap. You guide them onward, the plow biting once more, the soil splitting in relentless lines. The afternoon sun beats down, the sky wide and merciless. Sweat soaks your tunic until it clings to your body, dust streaking across your arms and face. You no longer smell like a person. You smell like earth and animal, a creature shaped by toil. And yet there's a strange peace here. Each row completed feels like progress you can see and touch. Unlike the endless chores at the hearth, these furrows are visible evidence of your effort. You look back at the dark lines etching across the field, neat as a page of writing, and feel a flicker of pride. Hardship, yes, but also creation. You've carved order from the wilderness. By late afternoon, the work slows. Oxen stumble with fatigue. Farmers groan as they stretch their backs, and even the crows give up on heckling. The field lies freshly plowed, a tapestry of dark soil ready for seed. You pat one ox on the flank, whisper a tired thanks, and lead them back toward the village. The beasts lumber patiently, hooves sinking deep in the path, their tails flicking lazily at flies. As you re-enter the village, the smell of smoke and bread hits you again. Children run up, asking breathless questions about the day's work. Women call for help carrying baskets of vegetables. Somewhere, a bell tolls, reminding you that evening is on its way. You glance back once more at the fields, now quiet, furrows catching the golden light of sunset. The plow has done its part. Tomorrow will bring sowing, weeding, guarding. The cycle never ends. But tonight, at least, you carry the satisfaction of a day's toil written visibly across the land. The smell of earth still clings to your clothes as you wander back into the heart of the village, but your day isn't done. The plow may carve its furrows in the fields. Yet another rhythm rules this place, the gathering of people. The market square and the low buzz of voices swapping news as eagerly as they swap goods. You brush dirt from your tunic pointless, really. Since you're already stained in sweat and soil, but at least you look halfway respectable for the next round of social obligations. The market is not a grand spectacle with rows of polished stalls. No, it's a jumble, a knot of people circling a cluster of makeshift tables. Baskets and carts pulled into the village center. Chickens squawk as they're tugged by ropes. Dogs dart between legs hunting crumbs, and the air swirls with a cocktail of smells. Fresh bread, smoked fish, damp wool, and someone's cabbage that really should have been cooked yesterday. You slip into the flow, pulled by curiosity as much as necessity. After all, you need more than your own household can provide. The square is where gossip and goods mingle, where you can trade surplus beans for a chunk of salt pork or a pair of eggs for a scrap of cloth. Coins are rare here. Barter rules the day. A woman calls out that her onions are the sweetest in the shire, while her neighbor loudly insists hers won't rot within the week. You smirk, realizing medieval marketing strategy is really just shouting the loudest. You glance at a stall where a blacksmith has laid out simple tools, nails, hinges, knives with handles wrapped in leather. Each piece glints faintly in the light, and you run a finger along the cool edge of one blade. The smith catches your eye, chin lifted proudly. Iron is precious, and his work gives him a rare kind of leverage in this small world. Tools break, and when they do, you come crawling to him, no matter how grumpy his mood. Next to him, a weaver shakes out a length of rough wool cloth. It's scratchy, heavy, and dyed a murky brown with local plants. Not exactly Parisian Fashion Week, but if you want to survive winter, you'll wear it gratefully. She haggles fiercely with a man offering eggs in exchange, both of them calculating how many omelets equal a blanket. You linger, amused, watching the negotiations stretch on like a tug of war with no rope. And here's your mainstream historical fact. Medieval villages weren't isolated bubbles cut off from the world. They were plugged into larger networks, however loosely. Markets brought not only local produce, but also goods from farther afield. Salt, for example, might travel hundreds of miles before reaching your hands, carried in sacks on weary pack horses. Without salt, preservation fails and winter pantries collapse. That lump of white crystal in a jar. It's more precious than gold on a cold February night. Nearby, a fishmonger yells about his catch, though you eye the goods skeptically. The river isn't exactly generous this season, and those fish look suspiciously like they've seen better days. You hear someone mutter that fishmongers are masters of perfume masking yesterday's catch with herbs or vinegar. You wrinkle your nose and move along quickly before the smell sticks to your tunic. Now, for a quirky tidbit. In some towns, sellers were known to cheat by hollowing out loaves of bread or watering down ale. In fact, laws were passed to regulate the weight of bread and the strength of beer. Get caught selling weak ale, you might be fined or worse, forced to drink your own watery brew while the village laughs at you. Imagine being publicly roasted, medieval style, for running the worst microbrewery. You pause by a cart loaded with clay jugs, pitchers, and bowls, their surfaces uneven but charming. The potter beams, holding up a jug glazed faintly with green expensive. Exotic, because true glaze requires minerals not easily found here. You turn it over in your hands, fingers tracing its cool surface, and you imagine it sitting on your hearth, filled with ale. Tempting, but you remember the beans still tucked under your arm. Beans do not equal pottery, not unless you find someone desperately craving stew. The market is not just about trade, it's a stage for voices. You catch a snatch of gossip. The Reeve's daughter might be secretly promised to a man from the next village. Another whisper claims a traveling peddler brought trinkets from far-off lands, bright glass beads. A brass pin, even a scrap of silk, so fine it slides through the fingers like water. These luxuries are rare enough to spark envy. Someone jokes that if you wore silk here, the pigs would laugh at you. Still, you feel a shiver. Even in a mud-walled village, the world beyond is tugging at the edges. Historians still argue whether markets like these were more about survival or social glue. Yes, people needed onions, cloth, and tools, but they also needed the chatter, the stories, the chance to laugh and commiserate with neighbors. You suspect it's both. The goods fill your belly. The gossip fills your spirit. After all, survival isn't only about calories, it's about connection. A bell clangs suddenly, calling attention to the square. The Reeve steps forward, puffed up with authority, and announces the Lord's latest demand, an extra cartload of grain set aside for rent. Groans ripple through the crowd. You exchange glances with your neighbor, both of you thinking the same thing, as if you weren't already stretched thin, but no one dares argue too loudly. Authority here is not gentle, and the Lord's men have long memories. To break the tension, a juggler appears, bright-eyed, balancing 3 wooden balls. Children squeal, clapping as he tosses them higher and higher. He bows dramatically, then winks as he passes his cap around for coins. Few have spare silver, but someone drops in a chunk of bread, which he accepts cheerfully before popping it into his mouth, medact. You laugh, realizing that in some ways, street performers haven't changed a bit. The sun tilts toward afternoon, shadows stretching long. The market begins to thin. Goods packed back into baskets, children dragged reluctantly home. You tuck your own small trades under your arm, a hunk of salt pork, a wedge of cheese, maybe even a sprig of dried herbs. They'll flavor the evening meal, make the pottage less monotonous. Little victories, but victories all the same. As you leave, you pass the church again. Its doors open, the smell of incense drifting faintly. A few villagers kneel inside, whispering prayers. Others hurry past, muttering about needing to finish chores before nightfall. Faith and practicality wrestle constantly here, one ear tuned to the bell, the other to the demands of the plough and hearth. You step onto the path home, the chatter of the market still buzzing in your ears. You carry not just food, but fragments of stories, whispered secrets, complaints, and laughter. The square has emptied, but its echoes remain, weaving into the fabric of village life like threads in a homespun tunic. The plough may till the soil, but the market tills the soul. Without it, the village would be hungrier not just in stomach, but in spirit. The bell tolls again, a deep iron sound that rolls over the village like a command. You pause, your small bundle of trade goods under your arm, and tilt your head. It's not calling you to market, nor to the Lord's revits, the midday call to prayer. The church stands squat and heavy at the village's heart. Stone walls streaked with lichen, a wooden door worn smooth by countless hands. You feel its pull as much as you feel the ache in your back. For in this medieval world, faith is not optionalized, is stitched into every seam of daily life. You step inside, the air is cooler here, thick with the tang of incense. Beeswax candles flicker, their flames small but defiant against the dim stone interior. The priest's voice rises in Latin, words you barely understand, but know by sound. The chant rolls through the nave, weaving mystery into familiarity. You bow your head, fingers fumbling clumsily through the sign of the cross, joining the others in a rhythm older than your memory. To a modern eye, this ritual might feel like an interruption in the day, but to you, it is the day's anchor. Work is framed by bells, matins before dawn, prime as the sun climbs, sext at midday, vespers at dusk. Each ring reminds you that time is not truly yours, belongs to God, to the seasons, to the order of heaven itself. You glance around at the faces beside you. Some lips move earnestly, eyes shut tight in devotion. Others mouth the words mechanically, thoughts clearly elsewhere. Cows to be milked, bread to be baked, debts to be paid. Children squirm, their mothers tugging them back down. An old man coughs weightily into his sleeve. Holiness is messy, lived in the cracks between hunger and fatigue. Here's your first mainstream historical fact. The medieval church wasn't just a place of worship, was the center of community life. It kept records of births, marriages, and deaths. It enforced laws, mediated disputes, and controlled education for the very few who learned to read. Without the church, there would be no calendar, no festivals, no rhythm to the year. Even the agricultural cycle bowed to holy days. And yet, beneath the incense and chants, doubts sometimes smoldered. You've heard whispers, mutters when the priest passes, that tides are too high, that the church demands too much grain while villagers scrape through the winter. One neighbor swore under his breath that the saints never answered prayers unless silver was slipped into the box. You don't dare repeat such words aloud, but you feel the sting of them. Faith is both comfort and burden. After the short service, you shuffle out into the sunlight. The church door swings closed, leaving behind the echo of hymns. The village resumes its noise, hammers striking metal, dogs barking, a child crying after a tumble in the dust. But the mark of the church lingers. Even the gossip you hear is colored by it. A woman mutters about her neighbor's cow trespassing on her garden, then adds that God surely saw it and will punish the thief. The language of heaven is woven into every petty squabble. Now, for a quirky tidbit, not every medieval villager went meekly to church. Some were known to slip charms into their pockets' small bones, knotted strings, even herbs believing these carried protective power. Officially condemned as superstition, these charms lived side by side with prayers to the saints. A villager might kneel in church at sext, then tuck a sprig of St. John's wort under the bed at night to ward off evil spirits. Faith and folk magic blended like smoke in the rafters. No clean line divided them. You head toward your home, but the sound of young voices singing stops you. A group of children play in the lane, skipping and chanting a rhyme about saints driving out devils. Their game is simple, their laughter sharp, but the rhyme holds a shadow of fear. In their world, devils are not distant metaphors. They lurk in forests, in sickness, in sudden storms that flatten crops. Every prayer, every hymn, every ritual meal is a shield against the unknown. The priest himself emerges from the church, robes gathered, his eyes scanning the square. He pauses to bless a woman cradling a newborn, pressing his hand gently on the baby's head. The mother beams, proud, relieved. That small blessing might feel like a lifeline in a world where infant mortality looms like a storm cloud. Behind her, another villager waits to confess a quarrel with his brother over land. The priest listens, nods, murmurs, penance. His role stretches beyond prayers. He is counselor, judge, teacher, and, sometimes, the only literate man for miles. But priests are not saints. You've heard the jokes whispered in taverns that priests drink too much ale, that they have housekeepers who are suspiciously young. The church may preach chastity, but humanity seeps through. And though villagers might grumble about hypocrisy, they still gather at Mass, still kneel when the bell calls. For faith is not about flawless leaders, it is about survival in a world too precarious to face alone. A little girl tugs at your sleeve, pointing toward the crucifix above the church door. "Does he see us all the time?" she asks. You hesitate, then nod. Her eyes widen, and she dashes off, suddenly guilty about some mischief. You smile faintly. Whether true or not, belief has power, shaping behavior more effectively than fear of the Lord's reeve. You resume your walk. Around you, signs of faith pepper the village. A carved cross nailed above a door. A small shrine by the road piled with flowers. Even a crude painting of the Virgin tucked into the corner of a cottage. These are reminders that every path, every field, every hearth lies under divine gaze. When storms ruin the harvest, when sickness sweeps through, villagers turn not to reason, but to ritual. They light candles, they march in processions, they beg the saints for mercy. And yet, despite this intensity, faith is not always solemn. Festivals blaze with color. Corpus Christi, Easter, Christmas. On those days, the village erupts in song, plays are performed, ale flows freely. Faith, then, is not only prayer-writ, is celebration, a chance to laugh in God's name. You recall a priest once shouting above a drunken crowd, "Joy is holy too." The memory makes you grin. Historians often debate whether medieval villagers were truly devout or simply obedient. Standing here, watching your neighbors bow their heads while muttering about chores, you suspect the truth is tangled. Faith was not a separate compartment, it was the language of life itself. To question it openly was dangerous. To live without it was unthinkable. Belief was not an option, but a condition of existence. As the afternoon sun warms your back, you realize how heavy the unseen structures of faith weigh on your shoulders. They guide when you eat, when you rest, when you plant, when you marry. They tell you what meat is forbidden on Fridays, what days you must fast, what oaths you must never break. Sometimes it feels like a cage, sometimes like a safety net. Either way, you cannot imagine a world without it. The shadows stretch longer now. Soon you will retreat to your smoky hearth, the day's work pulling you into the night. But before you leave the square, you glance back once more at the church, its tower stubby against the sky. You hear the faint echo of the priest's voice, smell the last traces of incense. The plough may feed your body, but the church feeds your soul or, at least, binds it. And as you walk away, you wonder quietly whether the saints really listen, or whether it is only the sound of your own voice in the stone nave. You do not linger on the thought. Better to pray and be safe than to doubt and be damned. The sun dips low, spilling a last wash of orange across the village roofs. Your body aches from the day's tasks. Your stomach growls with the sort of dull insistence that only a peasant's dinner can quiet. You push open the crooked wooden door of your home, and the familiar assault greets you. The smell of smoke, the tank of boiled cabbage, the faint musk of damp straw. This is the center of your world, the smoky hearth. The fire squats in its place, embers glowing faintly beneath blackened logs. Smoke curls up, not toward a chimney because, let's be honest, your house doesn't have one but straight into the rafters. Where it lingers, thick enough to sting your eyes and stick to your clothes. You cough. Wave a hand in front of your face, but soon enough, you're used to it. Everyone is. The hearth is both blessing and curse. It cooks your food, warms your family, and drives off the chill of damp nights. But it also fills your lungs with soot, leaving that familiar rattle in the old folks' chests. You lower yourself onto a rough wooden stool. A pot hangs above the fire, its lid rattling gently as broth bubbles inside. Tonight's dinner is simple: barley, onions, maybe a shred of salted pork if you're lucky. The scent is sharp but oddly comforting, a smell you've known every day of your life. A bowl is pressed into your hands, wooden spoon clattering against the rim. You blow on the broth, sip carefully, then take a bigger gulp, warmth sliding down into your belly. The hearth isn't just where you eat, it's where the entire family gathers. Crammed clothes on benches or stools, elbows knocking, children squirming. Stories unravel here, weaving through the smoke. Someone jokes about a neighbor's cow getting loose in the churchyard. Another recalls a tale of a saint who supposedly tamed a wolf. A child pipes up with a riddle they learned from a passing peddler, and the room chuckles when the answer turns out to be something cheeky. Here comes your mainstream historical fact. The hearth was the central feature of a medieval peasant's home. It wasn't merely functional, it defined the household. Families ate, worked, and sometimes even slept around its warmth. The fire never truly went out. To let it die was to invite cold, hunger, and extra labor to spark it again. Some villagers even carried embers from house to house to share flame with neighbors, like passing around life itself. And here's a quirky tidbit: ashes from the hearth weren't just swept away. People collected them, mixing them with lye to make rough soap, or sprinkling them in corners to keep away pests. Some even believed ashes had protective magic, driving out witches or ensuring good luck. Imagine trying to convince your modern friends that a scoop of gray powder from the fireplace could keep your cow from going dry. Medieval life, part chemistry, part superstition. The chatter continues around you, but your eyes sting as the smoke thickens. You tilt your head back, squinting up at the rafters where strips of meat hang curing, cloaked in soot. Everything in this room tastes faintly of smoke bread, cheese, even the straw mattress you'll collapse onto later. You shift your stool closer to the fire, balancing warmth against watery eyes. Someone sneezes violently, then groans. Coughs ripple around the room. It's the soundtrack of the hearth. You joke to yourself that if medieval villagers had a band, they'd call it the wheezing choir. You smile into your bowl, keeping the thought to yourself. A neighbor drops by, ducking through the doorway with a loaf under their arm. It's common practice: food shared, borrowed, bartered. You break bread together, dipping pieces into the broth. Conversation turns somber as someone mentions a recent death and old man finally claimed by that ever-present cough. No one acts surprised. It's just part of the rhythm of life here. But a hush falls, broken only by the crackle of fire. The silence doesn't last long. Soon, someone starts humming a tune, a low, lilting melody. The room softens, voices joining in, children clapping their hands. You sway gently, letting the music wash over you. Songs around the hearth are as old as the village itself, some telling tales of saints, others of knights who may or may not have ever existed. The point isn't accuracy, it's comfort, community, a way to pass long nights without sinking into silence. Historians still argue whether peasants were truly miserable or whether they carved out more joy than we give them credit for. Standing here well, sitting here you suspect it's both. Life is brutal, yes, but moments like this, huddled by firelight, sharing laughter and bread, give it warmth beyond the flames. Your belly fills, your eyelids grow heavy. The youngest children curl up near the fire. Already asleep, their cheeks flushed in the glow. You notice how the hearth light plays tricks on the walls, shadows flickering like restless spirits. No wonder villagers tell ghost stories at night. How could you not, with shadows dancing just out of reach? You recall one of those tales of a woman who angered a spirit by neglecting her hearth, leaving the fire to die. The spirit appeared, cloaked in smoke, and dragged her away. The moral is obvious: don't let the fire go out. You smirk at the simplicity, but you also make a mental note to feed the flames before bed. Better safe than sorry. Your eyes wander to the single window, a square opening stuffed with oiled cloth that hardly keeps the wind out. Beyond it, the night grows darker, and you imagine other households just like yours. Fires glowing, smoke rising into the black. The village is a patchwork of hearths, each one a heartbeat. Without them, there is no life. As the evening deepens, work doesn't vanish, simply changes shape. Someone mends a torn tunic by firelight. Another carves a wooden spoon, careful not to nick their fingers in the dim glow. You watch the delicate rhythm of needle and thread, the slow rasp of knife on wood. Productivity never truly stops, not even when darkness falls. A dog curls at your feet, sighing deeply. You rest your hand on its fur, grateful for the extra warmth. The room hums with quiet industry, the fire crackling like a companion. For a moment, you forget the aches in your shoulders, the debts owed, the uncertainty of the next harvest. Here, within this smoky cocoon, life feels briefly secure. Then comes the reminder of fragility. A sudden gust pushes through the cracks, making the fire sputter dangerously. Everyone gasps. Someone leaps up, shielding the embers with a clay pot until the flames recover. A collective sigh follows. In this world, losing your fire isn't just inconvenient, it's dangerous. The hearth is survival itself. You lean back, let your spoon clatter empty into the bowl, and close your eyes. Laughter trickles around you, void for a fleeting second. You imagine them as stars in a smoky sky. You breathe in, cough once, then settle. This, you realize, is what medieval comfort looks like. Cramped, smoky, noisy, but full of life. The hearth doesn't just feed you. It gathers you, warms you, binds you to family, neighbors, and generations past. You are tethered to it and it to you, both prison and protector. And as your head dips forward, the last thing you hear is the crackle of fire and the murmured rise of another story, half-truth, half-dream carried on the smoke. The fire has burned low, the room thick with smoke, and the children snore softly on their straw bedding. But tonight, there's no early retreat to sleep for you. A knock rattles the door, sharp and insistent, followed by the muffled sound of laughter outside. Someone calls your name, and you recognize the voice immediately. A neighbor grins when you open the door. "Come on," he urges. There's a wedding feast. The whole village is there. You don't need much convincing. Weddings are rare splashes of color in a life mostly painted in mud and smoke. You tug on your cloak, brush the soot from your hair, and step into the cool night air. Lanterns bob along the lane as villagers drift toward the largest barn, its doors thrown wide. Music seeps out pipes, drums, the rhythmic thump of feet. Already, the air is thick with the smell of roasting meat and spilled ale. Inside, chaos reigns in the best way. Benches line the walls, groaning under platters of bread, cheese, and meat pies. The bride and groom sit at a long table, beaming, cheeks flushed from wine and excitement. You squeeze into a seat, someone presses a mug into your hand, and before you've taken your first sip, a stranger claps you on the back, shouting over the din. "Drink." It's bad luck to leave a mug half full tonight. You obey. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Weddings in medieval villages were less about romance and more about alliances and survival. Marriages were contracts, often negotiated between families to merge land, secure labor, or strengthen ties. Love might grow after the vows, but practicality came first. Still, when the deal was sealed, the feast was for everyone. Villagers needed little excuse to turn such events into days-long revelry. The bride, her dress simple but adorned with ribbons, twirls across the packed dirt floor, laughter spilling louder than the music. The groom tries to keep pace but stumbles, nearly colliding with a pail of ale. The crowd roars with amusement. Children chase each other between benches, sneaking bites of bread. Old women lean in close, trading gossip, their eyes twinkling with both mischief and judgment. You, caught up in it all, feel lighter than you have in weeks. Someone produces a fiddle, strings squealing before resolving into a lively tune. Feet stomp, hands clap, voices rise in song. The smoke from torches hangs heavy overhead, but no one cares. Tonight is about forgetting the weight of work, debts, and hunger. Tonight, there is only music, ale, and celebration. Of course, weddings aren't the only gatherings. Soon enough, your mind drifts to other communal events. Wakes when the barn doors are flung wide, not for joy, but for mourning. You've stood in those same spaces, the air thick not with laughter, but with quiet tears. A body laid out, candles flickering, neighbors murmuring prayers. And yet even their rel flows, songs rise, and stories are told. Grief is softened by company. Death is not endured alone. A musician strikes a slower tune, and someone nudges you with a grin. "Minstrels?" he says, knowingly. And sure enough, a wandering player has joined the crowd, his clothes patched, but his presence commanding. He launches into a tale, half sung, half spoken, of knights and dragons, of ladies fair and battles glorious. The children gape, wide-eyed. Adults chuckle, rolling their eyes but leaning in anyway. You know most of it is nonsense. Dragons are as real as bread that bakes itself, but the words transport you. For a few minutes, you're not a villager with calloused hands. You're riding into battle, sword flashing, destiny calling. Quirky tidbit time. Some minstrels had reputations not just for storytelling, but for smuggling news between villages. Along with their songs, they carried gossip of kings, wars, and far-off wonders. They were the medieval version of a newsfeed, though admittedly with more singing and questionable accuracy. A two-headed calf was born in York. One might proclaim. True? Who knows? But it made for a good story. Back at the feast, someone spills their ale all over your cloak. You groan, wiping it down, but the offender only laughs, slapping you on the back. You'll thank me tomorrow. Ale cures everything. You're not convinced, but you can't help laughing anyway. The night stretches on. Dancers tire, voices grow hoarse, but the energy refuses to die. The bride, cheeks glowing, raises her mug and shouts to the village. The crowd echoes her, mugs raised high. You clink yours with your neighbors, the sound ringing like a small, defiant bell against the dark outside. Historians still argue whether peasants used these feasts as rebellion against the grind of daily life, or whether they were simply sanctioned safety valves, encouraged by lords and priests to keep the people content. You don't know the answer. All you know is that tonight, surrounded by music and laughter, the hardship of life feels a little less sharp. Later, when the torches burn low, someone begins a bawdy song, verses too colorful to repeat in polite company. The elders feign outrage but grin all the same. Children are shooed out, giggling as they run into the night. The barn echoes with raucous laughter, the kind that leaves your sides aching. You join in until your throat is raw, tears streaking your face from both smoke and mirth. At last, the music slows. Couples lean against each other, heads drooping. The bride nearly asleep on her groom's shoulder. Benches are scattered with dozing figures, mugs toppled and forgotten. You pull your cloak tighter, step into the cool night once more. The air is crisp, the stars sharp above the dark thatch roofs. Behind you, the barn still hums faintly, with snores and whispers. You walk home slowly, feet dragging, heart lighter. The village, usually so quiet and heavy with work, feels transformed. For one night, you've tasted abundance. You've sung, you've laughed, you've remembered that even peasants are human, capable of joy as much as toil. And when you reach your smoky hearth again, curling up beside fading embers, the echo of song still lingers in your ears. Weddings, wakes, wandering minstrels, they bind you to your community. Remind you that even in a world of mud and hunger, life is more than survival. It's also stories, songs, and the fleeting sweetness of nights like this. Dawn creeps slowly over the horizon, painting the village in a pale gold that feels almost fragile. You stir on your straw mattress, muscles still aching from yesterday's plowing, the smoky scent of the hearth clinging to your clothes and hair. The air is chilly, dew clinging to the thatch roofs, and somewhere a rooster crows with unearned authority. The world is waking, and so must you. You sit up, stretching stiff limbs, and glance at the hearth. Even before lighting the fire, you can feel the pull of daily tasks pressing in. Water must be drawn, the animals fed, breakfast prepared. There's a rhythm to it, steady and relentless, and you've learned to move with it rather than against it. The day is already in motion, and you are caught up in its current. The kitchen is small, the walls darkened with years of smoke, soot streaking the corners like a permanent shadow. A small wooden bucket sits by the door, water drawn from the village well last evening. You pour a little into a tin pan, heating it on the embers still smoldering from the night before. Steam rises slowly, carrying the scent of minerals and dirt. It's enough to wash hands and face, a rudimentary cleanse, but it feels indulgent compared to the mud and sweat caked to your skin. Outside, the village stirs. Chickens scatter through the lanes, pecking at stray grains. Dogs bark, a mix of warning and excitement, chasing after them or their own shadows. Smoke begins to rise from other cottages, thin tendrils twisting into the air as neighbors stoke their hearths. The smells mingle, baking bread, boiling grains, cooking porridge. Even before breakfast, the village is a symphony of scent, sound, and movement. You pull on your tunic, leather jerkin, and boots that have softened and warped with use. The leather groans at your movement, creaking under the weight of your body, but it's comforting, familiar. You step into the lane, boots squishing in mud softened by dew, and greet the first of your neighbors. A young boy waves a wooden bucket, trailing behind his mother as she collects eggs. Everyone exchanges brief, clipped pleasantries, a nod, a smile. A good morning, small acknowledgments that keep the fragile social fabric intact. Mainstream fact: mornings were often the busiest time for villagers. Tasks that required energy and daylight: milking cows, feeding pigs, tending the hearth, repairing fence, dominated the first hours. Meals were simple, often cold porridge or leftover bread, eaten quickly before labor began. Unlike modern mornings, there was no lounging with coffee or scrolling on a phone. The day demanded action immediately. You approach the cowshed. Inside, the animals shift and murmur, hooves clattering on the worn wooden floor. The smell is strong, sour, a mix of dung, hay, and milk. One cow nudges you, demanding attention, and you chuckle. Milking is both art and endurance. You grip the udder, steadying the bucket beneath, and work with slow, practiced motions. The warm milk fills the container, dripping in steady rhythms, a reminder that the simplest acts provide sustenance. Quirky tidbit: some medieval villagers believed that cows responded to the emotions of the person milking them. Calm hands and gentle words supposedly yielded more milk. Harsh or hurried movements led to sour milk or a cranky cow. Imagine explaining that to modern dairy farmers. They'd probably laugh or call it superstition. But in a world without refrigeration, every drop mattered, and every belief was a tiny hedge against loss. By mid-morning, the field calls again. You shoulder your tools, leading the oxen back to the freshly plowed earth. Yesterday's furrows are neat, promising. Today's work is sowing seeds, the beginning of a long cycle that will define the village's fate. You scatter grain carefully, finger by finger, ensuring it doesn't clump or fall into ditches. Oxen plod patiently beside you, occasionally snuffling at stray seeds with mild curiosity. Historians still argue whether medieval sowing was guided more by empirical observation or superstition. Some techniques were practical, spacing rows to maximize sun and water, but others involved charms, spoken incantations, or planting on specific days to align with the lunar calendar. You try not to overthink it, muttering a small rhyme that promises growth, because why not? Lunch is a brief pause. Bread, cheese, maybe some dried meat, eaten hungrily in the shade of a hedge. The sun climbs higher, heating your back, making sweat run down in rivulets. Dust sticks to it, forming a fine layer over skin and clothes. You sip from your water skin, tasting the faint tang of metal from the leather strap. Even the smallest comforts are earned here. Around the field, other villagers work. Some are reaping, some weeding, others repairing fences or clearing stones. The landscape is dotted with humans and beasts, all moving with purpose, all woven into a complex system of survival. You glance across the furrows and notice a neighbor arguing with his son over technique wine, insisting on depth. The other speed. It's loud enough to catch attention, but both are smiling beneath the exasperation. Teaching and learning happen constantly, often with hands-on correction rather than lectures. Quirky detail: in some villages, songs were sung while sowing, not just to entertain, but to encourage the seed. Rhythm and voice were thought to help growth, perhaps because they kept workers moving steadily, but the belief that seeds responded to music was widespread. You find yourself humming an old tune as your hand scatters barley across the dark soil, and for a moment, it feels like the field might be listening. By afternoon, the sun beats down relentlessly. You wipe sweat from your brow, dust covering every exposed inch of skin. Even simple movements are effortful. Yet there's satisfaction in this labor. The seeds are planted, the furrows straight and ready. You pause to admire your work, feeling the deep, earthy pride of creation. It's slow, backbreaking, relentless but tangible. Unlike wealth or power, this is something you can touch, measure, see. As the day wanes, tasks shift again. Oxen are unyoked, tools cleaned and stored. The village hums with evening chores, gathering firewood, tending the small kitchen gardens, mending clothes. You help a neighbor repair a fence post, the two of you working silently, punctuated by the occasional grunt or laughter at shared incompetence. Even in toil, companionship matters. Work is less burdensome when shared. Dinner is again simple, eaten in the dim glow of the hearth. Soup, bread, maybe a few vegetables from the garden. Conversation drifts lazily, stories retold with small embellishments, jokes recycled from market and feast alike. Children doze by the fire, and you feel the weight of the day pressing into every muscle. Historians debate whether the rhythm of work and rest in villages created a sense of stability or trapped villagers in cycles of endless labor. You lean against the wall, listening to the crackle of the fire, and suspect it is both. The patterns are harsh, but they are familiar, and familiarity is a kind of comfort. Night deepens. Lanterns burn low, animals settled for the evening, and the village sighs under the weight of stars. The hearth's smoke curls upward, carrying the scent of warmth into the rafters. You finally rest, body heavy, eyelids closing. Tomorrow promises more work, more repetition, more endurance, but for now, there is a moment of quiet. A pause in the relentless rhythm. And in that pause, you realize something vital. Life in the medieval village is not merely survival. It is a dance of labor, faith, and small joys, stitched together by community, rhythm, and ritual. You are a thread in that fabric, bound to the land, the hearth, and the people who share both. Dawn is a soft whisper over the village, the light pale and delicate as it slips between the thatched roofs. You stir once more, already anticipating the day ahead, knowing that the rhythm of labor will resume. Yet today feels different, lighter somehow, because you are tasked with a small, rare honor, visiting the Lord's domain to deliver a portion of the village's harvest. It's a short walk, but every step carries weights a sense of responsibility, the eyes of neighbors watching as you go. You shoulder a sack of grain, sturdy and well-worn, and step into the cool morning air. The path is muddy from last night's dew, but the sun already warms the edges of the lane. Chickens scatter, barking dogs follow their noses, and the smell of fresh bread and smoke wafts from nearby cottages. You nod to neighbors, exchanging quiet greetings. Today, you are not merely a villager. You are a messenger, a representative, and that carries pride and a trace of fear. The walk to the manor is uneven. Mud clings to your boots, and the oxen pulling a cart ahead grunt as they negotiate ruts. Trees line the path, their leaves trembling in the breeze, casting dappled light on the road. You hear birds singing, a distraction that makes you grin. Even in toil, nature provides brief pleasure. The manor itself rises ahead, stone towers catching sunlight, walls higher than any cottage you've seen. The Lord's influence is visible in every detail: well-tended grounds, guards moving with practiced precision, and the faint scent of baked bread drifting from the kitchens. Mainstream historical fact: peasants delivering dues or tithes to the Lord's manor was a standard part of village life. Obligations might include grain, eggs, meat, or labor. These contributions were essential for maintaining the feudal system, while the Lord provided protection and the right to farm the land. The villagers' payments kept the manor stocked and ensured the hierarchical order remained intact. You enter the courtyard, the smell of wood smoke and roasting meat mingling in the air. Servants move with purpose, carrying trays and tending animals. You set down your sack, bowing slightly as a steward approaches. He inspects the grain, nods, and scribbles on a parchment. It's a small, bureaucratic dance that keeps everyone in line, yet even here, a human touch lingers: a word of thanks, a brief smile, the acknowledgement of effort. Quirky tidbit: some villages had informal competitions during tithing. Who could carry the largest sack of grain? Who could reach the manor without spilling a single kernel? These contests weren't recorded in official histories, but they were common enough to make delivery day a blend of work and amusement. You've seen villagers stumble, laugh, and argue over measurements, turning labor into sport. You leave the manor and take a meandering path home, choosing the route through a patch of woodland. The air is cool and fragrant with pine, and the distant hum of insects adds a gentle soundtrack. You pause to examine a small stream, watching water ripple over stones, reflecting sunlight in tiny diamonds. You remember old stories claiming spirits dwelled in streams, punishing those who took more than their share. You smile faintly, recalling the charms you tucked in your pocket for safety, and toss a pebble into the water. Back in the village, the market square is quieter now, though a few stalls are being restocked. Children run past, chasing a stray goat, their laughter echoing off the walls. Dogs bark, hens cackle, and the familiar smell of smoke from morning fires laces the air. Life goes on with steady persistence, indifferent to your small triumphs or fears. Historians still argue whether peasants viewed the Lord's manor as oppressive or necessary. It was both, surely. Without the Lord's protection, raiders or harsh winters could devastate the village. Yet the demands were heavy, and resentment simmered beneath compliant faces. You sense this tension as you move through your neighbors, offering quiet nods and smiles. There is unspoken solidarity here, a shared understanding that survival requires compliance, but human hearts remain stubbornly private. At midday, the sun is high and fierce. You return to the fields, picking up where yesterday's work left off. Oxen plow, hands sow seeds, and the rhythm of toil hums in your bones. Sweat drips from your brow, mixing with dust and soil. But there's pride in the tangible outcome. Neat rows, a sense of progress, the knowledge that your labor has immediate effect. You pause occasionally, wiping your hands on your tunic, observing small victories, sprouts emerging where seeds were planted, a repaired fence holding firm, animals calm and fed. A neighbor joins you, carrying tools and a small wooden flute. He plays a short tune, clumsy but cheerful, and soon you're tapping your foot in time. Music is a rare companion in the fields, but it lifts spirits, connecting people in a way that words sometimes fail. The rhythm keeps you moving, your mind lighter despite the back-breaking effort. Quirky tidbit: some villages assign songs to different farming tasks. One tune might accompany sowing, another the harvesting of grain, another for plowing. It's unclear whether this improved productivity or simply added morale, but villagers swore by it. You hum a familiar tune as you sow, imagining the seeds dancing to the music under the soil. By late afternoon, fatigue weighs heavily. You pause beneath a tree, the shade a brief reprieve. The world seems vast and alive. Clouds drift lazily, birds circle, and distant hills promise both challenge and shelter. You remember tales of travelers who claim to have seen distant cities, strange lands, and marvels beyond comprehension. The thought sparks a small fire of longing in your chest. Yet here, in this humble village, life is immediate, tangible, and often harsh. The contrast is sharp, a reminder that adventure exists mostly in stories, though the longing for it is universal. Evening descends gently, the sun sinking behind the hills, painting the sky in rich reds and purples. The fields are quiet, the oxen resting, the work tools laid aside. Villagers drift back toward the cottages, voices softening, children tugged along by patient parents. You follow, boots heavy, back sore, but heart strangely light. The village hums with life, familiar and comforting, each household a small beacon in the encroaching darkness. At your own home, the hearth waits, embers glowing faintly. You feed the fire, the smoke curling upward, wrapping the room in warmth. Dinner is simple but satisfying. A bowl of pottage, bread, and a few herbs from your small garden. Conversation flows quietly. Stories passed in whispers now, as the day's work gives way to night. Fatigue is universal here. Everyone shares the same aches and pains, the same satisfaction and worry. Historians often debate whether such routines created a sense of stability or perpetuated monotony. For you, it is both. Stability lies in knowing exactly what tomorrow will demand. Monotony lies in the relentless repetition, yet there is comfort in that predictability. You are part of a cycle older than memory, one that ties you to land, neighbors, and generations past. Night deepens. The hearth smoke clings to your hair and clothes, familiar and oddly soothing. You lie back on your straw mattress, listening to the soft chorus of snores, occasional coughs, and the whisper of wind through the thatch. The village sleeps around you, connected by routine, labor, and a fragile but resilient sense of community. You close your eyes, heart heavy with exhaustion, light with small joys, and sink into the darkness. Night falls fully, cloaking the village in deep indigo. Stars prickle the sky, faint and steady, offering little light but a sense of scale. A reminder that the world is vast beyond the smoke-stained cottages. You stir on your straw mattress, aware that tomorrow will demand another cycle of labor, but tonight is different. Tonight, the village exhales, settling into a fragile peace after days filled with work, ritual, and occasional celebration. The hearth is the first place your hands seek. Embers glow faintly, a soft red heartbeat in the dim room. You poke gently at the ashes, coaxing the smallest flame to life. Smoke rises in slow spirals, catching the moonlight streaming through the crudely oiled window. The smell is familiar, almost comforting, even as it makes your eyes water. You arrange a pot for a late cup of gruel, a ritual as much as sustenance, watching the water darken and steam curl into the rafters. Outside, the village is quiet. The dogs lie curled against the walls, ears twitching in their sleep. Chickens have roosted for the night, occasional clucks echoing from the shadows. The wind moves through trees and rooftops, carrying a chill that brushes against your exposed skin. You wrap a threadbare cloak around your shoulders, grateful for the little warmth it provides. Even here, in a smoky cottage, night feels alive, full of unseen presence and quiet mysteries. Mainstream historical fact: medieval nights were dangerous and unpredictable. Without street lighting, shadows were deep, and people moved carefully, relying on torches, lanterns, or the moon. Wolves, thieves, and the occasional rogue traveler made travel after dark risky. Even within the village, you remained alert, listening for any unusual sound. The night was as much a test as the day, a time when vigilance never fully ceased. You sit, spoon in hand, tasting the gruel, plain but nourishing. Each mouthful carries the faint taste of smoke and earth, a reminder of toil and harvest. Your muscles relax gradually, the tension of the day bleeding into the warmth of the room. Children snore softly, parents whisper to one another, and for a moment, everything feels exactly as it should. Quirky tidbit: some villagers believed that specific nights were better for certain activities. Milk collected under the full moon was thought to stay fresh longer. Herbs picked at twilight were believed to carry extra potency. You recall a neighbor swearing that he once cured a cow's ailment by leading it past a field of flowers just as the last light of sunset faded. Superstition, yes, but it shaped daily life in subtle ways, influencing choices, timing, and even the smallest rituals. The village's rhythm is subtle but persistent. You can feel it even in the quiet. Doors creak as someone settles a latch. A cat meows in the distance. The low murmur of conversation drifts through gaps between cottages. The night carries its own work, often unseen, repairing roofs, tending fires, guarding livestock, listening for danger. It is a world as intricate as any day, demanding attention, patience, and respect. Historians still argue whether villagers were more guided by necessity or by belief in unseen forces. Was the constant attention to ritual, timing, and charm purely pragmatic, or did a deep-seated spiritual understanding drive decisions? Standing by the hearth, watching smoke curl and sparks rise. You suspect it is a mixture practicality dressed in superstition, survival dressed in ritual. A low wind rattles the wooden shutters, and you glance out the window. Beyond the village, fields stretch into shadows, trees lining distant hills, a river glinting faintly where moonlight catches. The world feels immense, almost threatening, but also full of quiet promise. You think of travelers' tales, distant lands, and strange creatures, and for a moment, your imagination soars beyond Plough, Hearth, and village wall. But reality draws you back. Tomorrow will demand labor, repetition, endurance. You pause, listening to the soft chorus of nocturnal life. An owl calls, wings slicing the air with silence and intent. Somewhere, a fox moves through the underbrush, unseen but felt. Even in your small cottage, the world is alive, full of mysteries and connections, reminding you that the village is not isolated. Life extends beyond, interwoven with forests, streams, hills, and distant towns. Dinner finished, you move to stoke the hearth one last time. Sparks dance upward, embers glowing, a reminder that fire is both fragile and resilient. You settle back, body heavy with fatigue, and let your mind drift. Stories of saints, minstrels, weddings, feasts, and toil swirl together. The rhythm of the village, the plough, the market, the church, the hearth is a symphony of survival, community, and occasional joy. Each task, each ritual, each whispered story is a note in the composition of daily life. Quirky detail: some nights, villagers would whisper to the fire itself, believing it could carry messages or prayers to unseen forces. You recall your own mother murmuring a small hope as sparks rose, a practice passed through generations. Whether magic or habit, it offered comfort, a sense that even a small flame could carry intention. Attention and care beyond the confines of the cottage walls. As the hour deepens, the village quiets further. Most have retreated to bed, their breaths slow and steady. The hearth crackles softly, providing warmth and companionship. You lean back, hands resting lightly on your knees, listening to the subtle sounds, the shift of wood, the faint movement of a cat, the soft sigh of wind. It is the intimate music of survival, subtle and constant. Historians often debate whether such intimate routines provided villagers with stability or perpetuated a sense of entrapment. You realize it is both. The patterns are strict, demanding, and predictable, but they also tie you to community, to land, and to generations who lived, laughed, and labored in the same rhythms. You are not alone. You are woven into a tapestry that stretches back and forward. Your eyes grow heavy. The warmth of the fire, the soft hum of nocturnal life, and the steady rhythm of the village lull you. You recall the day's tasks, tending animals, sowing seeds, delivering grain, and laughing at the wedding feast. Memories of smoke, laughter, music, toil, and prayer mingle. You exhale slowly, letting the village's rhythm carry you toward rest. Outside, the night is deep, stars glinting faintly, moonlight softening the edges of the world. The village sleeps, each hearth a small beacon against darkness. The plough rests in the field, oxen settle in their stalls, and the market square is silent, awaiting another day. Within your cottage, the fire dims, shadows stretch across walls, and you close your eyes, letting the warmth and rhythm cradle you. The world of medieval life is not easy. Fields demand sweat, markets require negotiation. The church asks obedience. The Lord exacts dues, but it is full of texture, community, and subtle wonder. Every task, every meal, every whispered story builds a life that is rugged, demanding, and remarkably human. And now, as your breath slows, the hearth embers glow faintly, the night hums softly, and you drift toward sleep. The village holds you in its quiet embrace, a tapestry of toil, song, faith, and small joys, carrying you gently into dreams. The night stretches longer, slower, softer, and you feel the village exhale with you. Smoke lingers faintly in your hair. The warmth of the hearth rests against your back, and the distant chorus of crickets hums in the dark. The air is cooler now, carrying whispers of distant forests and hills, the scent of damp earth, the faint trace of herbs and wood smoke. You breathe deeply, letting the quiet wrap around you like a soft blanket, easing every ache and worry from your body. You think of the day, the plough, the market, the church, the weddings, the feasts. You remember the faces of neighbors, friends, and family, their laughter, chatter, small scoldings, whispered prayers, and soft songs. Every action, every gesture, every shared story has woven a tapestry of life that is tangible and enduring. The village, with its smoke, mud, and warmth, holds memory, work, joy, and ritual in equal measure. Outside, the stars glitter faintly, distant but steady, and you imagine each one as a story. A life, a heartbeat similar to your own. The world is vast, but tonight it feels gentle, intimate, and safe. The hearth's embers glow, the children sleep, and the oxen rest, and in this quiet, you sense continuity's cycle of labor and laughter, survival and small triumphs, binding you to land, neighbors, and generations past. Your eyelids grow heavier, thoughts soften, edges blur, and the village hum becomes a lullaby. The smoke, the warmth, the rhythmic breathing of life around you all carry you toward rest. You exhale slowly, letting every worry and ache drift into the dim corners of the room, leaving only comfort, memory, and a sense of belonging. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Close your eyes, breathe deeply, and let the village cradle you in its quiet, smoky embrace.